Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and things have been going a little bit tough here for the Brooklyn Nets to begin the season over the last couple of days. The first couple of games looked fantastic. 2 losses now, though, in the next couple of games, and more importantly, Spencer Dinwiddie is now out for the season after suffering a knee injury. And this is a guy that his versatility became really, really important in this lineup, more important than I thought that it would be prior to the season. We're talking about him as someone that, is going to be a good scorer and a nice complementary playmaker, but he's also been doing a lot of things defensively as well, providing great length into that starting lineup. And without him now, that's a significant hole in the roster for Brooklyn. So we're going to talk about what that means for them now moving forward as they've established themselves as maybe one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference prior to this injury. And how are they going to deal with that? But then also some moves they could potentially make on the trade markets and players they could go and get that would help them kind of deal with this loss of Spencer Dinwiddie. So as I was talking about in the intro, there weren't really many options on this Nets roster when you're looking at it preseason for guys that were going to be kind of in that in-between spot. Like you've got Kevin Durant, you've got Kyrie Irving, and you've got other guys on the roster can score, guys like Caris LeVert and Dinwiddie in that category as well. But where were the perimeter defenders? Where were the active defensive guys? Where were the guys that provide length on the perimeter? You knew that you had things locked down at the 5 spot between DeAndre Jordan and Jarrett Allen, but everywhere else was a bit of a question mark. And early in the season, Spencer Dinwiddie had really stepped up and become the answer to that question in some different areas. It's not like he's out there locking people down, but just his length and his activity level was a big difference maker for this group. And now that he's going to be out for the season, that's going to be something the Nets are going to have to contend with. Because again, when you look at the roster, you've got scores. LeVert is in there, but he's not the same, activity level guy that Dinwiddie was on the perimeter. And then you're looking at guys like Taurean Prince and Jeff Green, and of course Kevin Durant in the front court. But how did this Nets team replace not only the scoring and the secondary playmaking that Dinwiddie provided, but also that versatility if you can help it? Well, the problem is there aren't really a ton of options on this roster in terms of just like throwaway contracts. Like there's no random player on the roster that's making like $7 million a year but isn't in the rotation and you can, trade their expiring for someone else, throw in a first round pick and get a quality player back. If you're looking at any player that has a significant salary, it becomes relatively difficult for the Nets to make any kind of move here. The exception to that would be if you're comfortable trading someone like Taurean Prince, who makes about $12 million this year, potentially could be interesting to another team. You trade Prince and a pick for a nice player in exchange to help you in your rotation. That could be an option. But if you're trading him for a guard, to kind of replace what Dinwiddie was doing, that further thins an already thin front court rotation, and then you're pretty much entirely relying on KD and Jeff Green to play like that combo forward spot. So that's definitely an issue here when you're looking at things from a contract perspective. Now, in terms of options on this roster, there's a handful of them. Other teams around the league that could potentially have someone available that the Nets could be interested in down the road. These are going to be closer to like that trade deadline, which I believe is in March, rather than anything in the immediate sense. For now, I think the Nets are going to kind of see if they can figure it out, replace him with, Luwawu Cabarro. I always struggle to pronounce his name. Bruce Brown, Rodion Kurucs. They're going to try and find some options there, right? But the first name that came to mind for me in terms of a player that I'm almost positive is going to be traded at some point this season was Derrick Rose of the Detroit Pistons. Presumably, they're not going to have a great season, and they're going to try and get value out of someone in Rose that certainly does have value around the league. And he is someone that I would certainly take a look at as potentially an option for Brooklyn. Of course, it's going to be all offense for Derrick Rose. He's not going to provide you any of that versatility, any of that, defensive activity and length that Dinwiddie was. But still, if you're looking strictly to replace the scoring and the offensive responsibility that Dinwiddie was carrying, I think that Derrick Rose would be a pretty good option to look at. But again, part of the issue here is he makes pretty close to $8 million. And you can package together like a couple of random young guys like Kurucs and Bruce Brown or Luwawu Cabarro, whatever. You can, trade 3 or 4 guys and get to that 8 million number and throw in a pick, and I'm sure Detroit would say yes, but that further thins your rotation for a player in Derrick Rose that, again, is going to be pretty one-dimensional in what he's going to add to your team. So do you really want to sacrifice the already limited wing depth that you have just to get another scoring guard in Derrick Rose just to be able to match the contract? Probably not. Again, you could throw Prince in there and trade Prince and a pick for Rose and some other salary filler in terms of getting rid of one of their few really good rotation combo forwards in Prince. Another option, and some of the similar issues are the case here for this player as well as they were for Rose. It's Ricky Rubio, another player that, like, if the Minnesota season doesn't go super well, they could be looking to move a veteran like Rubio later on down the road, closer to the trade deadline. Has 2 years left on his deal still, and is someone that, early in his career was a pretty good defender. He's not awful now, but he's not a huge difference maker either. He can do some things defensively, though, on the perimeter. Is someone that is kind of like a league average shooter as well, but is a nice playmaker and someone that can certainly run the second unit. You can put him and Karis LeVert out there in the second unit, and you're going to have a competent NBA offense. Again, defensively, he's going to be relatively one-dimensional, similar to Derrick Rose, and the contract is an issue as well there. You'd have to send Prince plus, maybe it's like Prince, Kurucs, and a pick in exchange for Ricky Rubio, and depending on your evaluation of Rubio, your evaluation of this roster and what this roster needs, that might be a little bit too rich for you. So another guy, though, to keep in mind, especially in the backcourt, as an option as we get down the road here. Another option, one that I'm not necessarily excited about, but again, if it really comes down to it and they want to add pieces for a potential postseason run, maybe you take a look at someone like Eric Bledsoe, and he would certainly provide a lot on the defensive end from a backcourt standpoint. Wouldn't, again, provide that length and that versatility up and down multiple positions the way that Dinwiddie did. But if Bledsoe can find a way to be competent offensively and make some shots and get to the rim a little bit, he can be a difference maker defensively. He can be an all NBA, all defense caliber guy on the defensive end of the floor. And that would be a huge addition to this group to be able to add, some of that defensive versatility in the backcourt specifically. Someone that can, go lock down a point guard or a two guard if you really need him to in a postseason series. Eric Bledsoe can do that. Now, whether or not he can stay on the floor offensively is a question mark. And again, salary-wise, it would be difficult to match, and you'd have to include Taurean Prince. You'd have to make that evaluation yourself. But another guy to kind of keep in mind here. Second to last now, as we get to kind of some wings, Terrence Ross of the Orlando Magic is an interesting one. Now, defensively, he's not going to do a ton for you. He's pretty much always been an all-offense guy since he's been in the league, but he's a sneaky good shooter. Like, Terrence Ross is streaky, yes, but he can really shoot the basketball when he's on, and adding more spacing to this roster I don't think would be a bad thing. That's another thing that Dinwiddie provided as an off-ball, not only shooter, but also attacker, off the dribble, off closeouts. Ross isn't going to be as good at that, but again, a wing option, you can maybe send Prince and a pick in exchange for Terrence Ross. Orlando could take a look at that, as Prince is a younger player. Maybe, someone that they'd rather have on the roster than Terrence Ross, who's slightly more expensive and slightly older as well. Maybe in their evaluation, that would be an option for them. And then last up is PJ Tucker, another player that I would be shocked if he doesn't get moved at some point this season, especially if James Harden ends up getting traded. He is an expiring contract. He is like 35, 36 years old, but PJ Tucker is going to compete. You know that he can rebound, he can defend, and he can knock down corner threes on the wing. He would be a nice veteran addition to this group, provide some toughness. And my personal preference would probably be PJ Tucker out of all the players on this list, because I don't think it would take much to get him. He could package together a couple of contracts to get to that like $7.5, $8 million number that he makes this year. Provides that wing depth and that versatility. Now, he can play up positions if you need him to, and just a guy that adds some toughness to this group and isn't on any kind of long-term contract, which, with the exception of Rose, every other player on this list, other than PJ Tucker and Derrick Rose, is on some kind of multiple-year contract, which kind of makes things a little bit more fishy for me. So that would be my preference, either PJ Tucker or Derrick Rose, just because of those shorter contracts. And then, if you want to explore someone like Terrence Ross, Eric Bledsoe, Ricky Rubio, that would be an option. I would expect the Nets to take a look at some things here throughout the season and see what they can do in terms of trade options. And these are 5 guys I would take a look at. And of course, the possibility always exists that this instigates a James Harden trade for them. Whether or not Dinwiddie was ever going to be involved in a Harden trade is unclear. More than likely, it was going to be something like LeVert and Allen and Prince and a ton of picks. But without Dinwiddie now, maybe it makes it a little bit more viable of an option for the Nets to go out and get James Harden again to add some of that offense that Dinwiddie was providing. Now, that's certainly, way over the top to bring in James Harden just because you lost Spencer Dinwiddie. And again, he wouldn't provide what you would really need defensively, and so that is always going to be a question mark. But I think this is a more significant loss than maybe people are realizing. Spencer Dinwiddie no longer being available for the Nets this season. It's unfortunate because I thought he was having a pretty good year. I thought he was really fitting in well in a way that the Nets needed. And without him, they're going to have to be looking at some different options, as we've outlined in this video, to potentially replace what he was providing, which is a significant amount to this roster. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. My name is Tucker. If you guys missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. I upload twice a day, every day, so this is a great place for consistent NBA content. If you want to subscribe, like the video, all that good stuff, it definitely does help me out a lot. I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day. If you want to hang out with me outside of these videos, you can check out the link tree down in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, whatever the case may be. There's all kinds of socials down there. Like I said, hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.